Good afternoon, not good morning, to the AutoTalk weekly wrap. A little bit late today. I was down in Auckland picking up a car and running a few errands and a few other things. So we're running a little bit behind. Apologies if I sound a bit funny. I, like half the parents in Auckland, have had a rather nasty cold this week. Luckily, we're getting over it, but it certainly has meant I've been off work and a little bit disconnected from what's been going on for the week. But the people who have not been disconnected are my co-hosts for today. First, bringing in the man who still can't sell a Toyota Brevis, Graham McDonald. How are you, Graham?
Well, it's a progress to you, Richard, and no, you can't buy my Brevis. No, you can't buy my Brevis. Best car Toyota ever made.
Well, I guess you need something reliable now. You've got reliable and efficient to drive now. You've got a V8 Mustang.
Well, in my stable, I've got a V8 Mustang and a Volkswagen, so I would say I'm doomed right from the get-go. Did I say that?
Does the Volkswagen run right now?
This week? Yes, actually, this week it is. Yeah, it didn't last week, but this week it is. But, you know, every week is a bonus, right?
Yes. I love driving a Tiguan, but as everyone on the trade will know, a used import Tiguan with a few Ks and a few years on the track becomes a lovely to drive vehicle to and from the mechanic's workshop. Richard,
mine is a New Zealand new Tiguan. Yes, it is. It actually, I'll confess, it's actually really nice to drive, and that's why I'm still ferrying around it, because it's an SUV, and I can chuck crap in it and really genuinely not care a damn about it. But reliability, no. But you know, I put up with the little details for the fact that it actually is. Well, I traded it; it was cheap enough, and when it does go, it's actually really, really nice. But other aspects, let's not talk about that.
And what's the popular aqua color of the week?
Oh, it's turquoise. This week's color brought to you, kids, is turquoise. We've sold a couple of those turquoise ones, and hot pink, which is a really, really fine demographic for hot metallic pink in an aqua, which I think we do quite well here. But dabble with those at your peril, because they are one of those things you've got to have a very, very defined target market for.
I like a loud car. I'd go for a hot pink
Would
aqua.
Yeah, and a matching handbag in your lippy as well. I can organise.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Graham. I didn't hear that.
Of course you didn't. But we can accessorise for you, Richard. That's all part of it. I can accessorise that. I'll talk to my designer people and have it matching for you. Easy done.
Right, and to bring in as well our friend who's smarter than us, because he is doing this podcast from a comfortable, semi-retired lazy boy. It's independent industry consultant, David Crawford. How are you today, David?
I'm good, but recovering from a knee arthroscopy on Wednesday, which has enforced me to take it very easy for the rest of the week, which means that I've done a lot of reading.
Yes. Reading the budget then? Did you read the budget from cover to cover?
Oh, I didn't read it from cover to cover. I read the highlights. That was enough.
Right. Well, look, we'll get to that during the news today. But look, let's jump into the news. In fact, no. First, I'm going to talk about something that I don't have any details yet to run on, or many details yet to run on, but I can 100% confirm AutoTalk Live is returning in 2023. Graham, do you want to come and host with me?
If I'm not in another certain country right about there, absolutely sure.
Yeah, no. So it's after that. No. We'll be in November again, and we're just finalising the location. We have made the decision we're going to come back into the city, so a little bit closer to the city this time. We haven't confirmed exactly where. Just because we want to mix it up a little bit. We might go back to the brewery at some point, but mix it up a little bit. And we're working on a great list of speakers for that. So we're just tying down that location now. We should, I would suggest, probably about 2 episodes from now, have a little more to tell people on that. But if you're wanting tickets for that or you want to sponsor it, just keep an eye on the podcast, keep in touch with us at AutoTalk, and we'll have some more information on that. Right, let's pull up the news. If I can get this right. Well, there we go. So, the Ministry of Transport's opened consultation on Euro 6 emission standards on new and used cars. And if I pull up the window with that, the Ministry of Transport is open. Consultation on Euro 6 vehicle emission standards, which will close on June 22. The proposed change to the Land Transport Rule Vehicle Exhaust Emissions 2007, the Vehicle Exhaust Emissions Amendment Rule, these are complicated, will reduce emissions from motor vehicles that cause significant harm to health, says the Transport Ministry. Says the proposed change to the amendment rule set out the lead-in times for bringing in a stronger vehicle emission standard. So apparently the division of the Ministry of Transport that's working on this understand lead times, but the other ones don't. I don't get it. The proposals are to rapidly shift the minimum requirement on used imports from Euro 4 to Euro 5, phase in the shift from Euro 5 to Euro 6 on used imports and new vehicles in several steps between late 2024 and the start of 2028, and introduce an emissions requirement for mopeds and motorcycles. Aotearoa and Australia are the only remaining developed countries that are yet to move to Euro 6, according to the Transport Ministry. It says the world's three largest automotive markets are now moving beyond Euro 6 and onto the next generation of even stronger standards, Euro 7, for China in 2023, Europe over 2025, 2027, and the US in 2027. So, that's happening. It was interesting. We were at a event recently for Mahindra launching a new vehicle there, and they were telling us how they were kind of ahead of us in regards to supposedly shifting to the kind of next level of Euro 6 for their petrol vehicles. So interesting to see this coming. David, have you got a take on this move? And I guess for the new vehicles, it's kind of had to happen sooner or later.
I do have a take, and it's both good and bad. And there's no doubt that we need to continually improve the standards that apply to vehicles when they come into the country around vehicle exhaust emissions. But there is a timing issue, and one of the concerns we have is that for the new vehicle, this is going ahead of Australia, particularly for the light diesel vehicles. So we've said to the minister, because he wrote to us in February about this proposed timeline, we said comfortable with trucks for 6C, comfortable with motorbikes other than mopeds and under 125cc, but we're not comfortable with the timeline for light vehicles, and particularly for light diesel vehicles, because Euro 6D requires a major platform change, and going ahead of Australia isn't going to work, and potentially could see us severely restrained in new light commercial vehicles, which has already been hard hit with the rebate and with the standard. We've also, our view is that we do need to go to Euro 6D, but it doesn't matter if he waits to time it with the Australian market, because it's the rate of electrification that we're seeing in our fleets is having a far bigger positive impact in reducing emissions than vehicle exhaust. Vehicle exhaust emission standards take 15 to 18 years to really impact, whereas electrification can impact almost straight away. So we don't think he has to rush it, but officials have ignored our advice on this one, and they've consistently ignored it, unfortunately.
What light commercials are going to struggle with 6D? Because, I mean, aren't the major sellers heading that way anyway? And Ranger is already 6D. I'm not sure. I assume Triton will go to 6D when it switches over to...
No, none of the light commercial vehicles, is my understanding, are 6D yet.
Right.
Ranger Ford can source a few Rangers from the South African market, but not a lot. So Utes, it's the Utes primarily, and they are manufactured in Thailand, and it requires a change to the manufacturing setup on the Thai factory. So for 6D, a much larger AdBlue tank is required to be positioned, and other things up front. And so a whole lot of stuff needs to be moved around in the engine bay. So we could go to from 5 to 6B much easier, because it doesn't require a reconfiguration of the platform design, but 6D requires a reconfiguration. And it's an issue because that reconfiguration has to occur at the Thai factory where the utes are made, compared to the other markets where the factories already had those changes for their models that are produced there.
How much of a time frame do you want?
Well, we understand Australia is going to be doing it in 27 and 28, so it's only another couple of years. In our view, probably would be that it's the light commercial diesel vehicles that need to have the relief.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Now, from the used side, Graham, I mean, this does chop out a fairly big chunk of the market, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I guess the used industry always sounds like a broken record when we talk about intervention of the marketplace. And you know, guilty as charged. I've been on that bandwagon myself before. But it's the same issue that David's talking about, really, is I think we're increasingly seeing legislation out of step with the ability of the market to supply. And I sort of teed back to the minister's points that he raised in the podcast from last week, talking about all these larger seven-seater vehicles we could source that didn't require a fee out of Japan. And I'm thinking to myself, well, come to Japan and let me know where you find them, because we sure as hell haven't. And I think there's just this constant disconnect between what our market, the used marketplace, what it can actually source, because we don't build these things. We never have. We don't build new used cars. And we're always at the mercy of what is available in the primary source markets to New Zealand, which is Japan, consistently Japan. And if Japan isn't supplying it in the numbers or volume or price ranges that we need, we just can't buy it. And so I haven't done the numbers or detail on Euro 4 to Euro 5 for the popular makes and models, although I believe Aqua is one of the ones that may actually be affected in that, certainly the pre-2018 range, and I'd need to verify that. We've just had this enormous series of changes to the way we import, whether it's CCD or CCS, and as David says, the increasing electrification through our fleet, and obviously the hybrids. And I ask myself again, what sort of nuts are we trying to crack with this in such a short time frame? Why isn't anyone in the ministry actively looking at what the industry can supply as opposed to dictating what it should do?
Well, Graham, they've asked us they've asked the new vehicle sector what can be supplied, and the new vehicle sector has been very clear, but they ignored that advice.
Well, as I say, they didn't listen. So that's part of the problem, is that they've got to ask the question, because that would be poor consultation if they didn't. But as we've seen time and time again, David, it's not the consultation, it's what they do with the information that's given to them that seems to be the problem. And I'm sorry, officials listening right now, I don't mean this personally, of course, but it's, if you're going to consult with the industry, if you're going to ask the questions, at least there's the decency of doing something with the information we give you, rather than just treating it as a patsy, box tick, consulted, carry on doing what we want it to do.
Yeah, and it's not as if, at least from the new vehicle sector, there's no desire to go to higher vehicle exhaust emission standards. There are. It's where our vehicles are sourced from, in which markets are made for, that are critical constraints. And it's likewise with motorcycles. Most of the motorcycles above 125cc are already Euro 4, and some of them are Euro 5. And increasingly, there'll be higher standards, because motorcycles are easier to source from a wider range of factories. The only thing we have to change is to ensure that the headlight is a dip bias left rather than dip bias right, if it's sourced from a right-hand drive market. But under 125cc, it's very difficult, because the rest of the world is starting to go to electrified mopeds and smaller motorbikes.
Yeah.
And so, we think for the contribution that motorbikes under 125cc make to poor air quality is negligible, and it's going to be alleviated in any event by electrification, because that's the first part of the fleet that's going to be electrified. So again, there are pathways that have been promoted, but the legislation proposal and the rule consulting on doesn't seem to pick up that degree of flexibility.
I almost feel like there's an element of going back to my old argument when it comes to electrification, in that, and I guess emission standards follow with this too, is from what you're saying there is does New Zealand risk, if we keep following Australia, if we keep waiting for them, slipping into this mold of essentially taking vehicles that are specced up for developing markets as opposed to for pushing further. That's the question, and I mean, if what would say Ford and Toyota do if we did go to 6D? Would they exit the market? I don't think they'd do that. I think they would find a way to get that specification.
Well, it's not quite as easy as that, Richard. the issue is that Australia have several other things that they need to correct before they can go down to the Euro 6D. So there's fuel standards, fuel quality, and such like. So they've had a problem with a lot of their domestic refineries needing to have significant upgrades to be able to get the fuel. We don't have that constraint, although there are some other standards for fuel quality that need to be improved before we can go to 6D. And INBI, with their fuel standards, have got that on their radar. But the large part of how the new vehicle market works is that the Australian and the New Zealand market is joined at the hip in terms of vehicles are designed for this part of the world and are built for this part of the world. And the ability to break it will increase over time, but it's not something that can change overnight.
Graham, if we go back to the used side of the market, I mean, you've always seen, I guess, historically, these step changes that ultimately add up to a de facto X-year rule for the used car market. It's got to be the argument why one of the arguments why we've never had one of those, besides the fact that, regulation-based is what we need rather than some kind of arbitrary figure. Is this that next step change? I mean, is this the next DSC? Is it that thing that, while we ultimately hate it, does actually keep improving, just that gradual improvement in quality of the vehicles, or do you see it as a death knell kind of one? It seems to. I think it's more in that kind of that latter kind of. Sorry, the former kind of situation where it is just yet again another one of those little step changes that just keeps chopping off that older range of vehicles.
Well, I don't think anyone's ever said, I mean, there may be a few in the trade, I don't know, ever said, look, we should never continually improve what you bring in. Woe betide you if you do. But the old argument holds, just as David said, is as long as it's manageable by the importers or the distributors, depending on which side of the fence you sit on. And we seem to be going in a bit of a path like this over recent years between what government or officials want and what the market can provide. And I just think if we just aligned ourselves a bit closer, so we did this, we've all got the same basic ideology, I think, about what we should be doing long term in the future. What we disagree about, as always, is the timeframes. And increasingly, the Japanese marketplace, we find that that's a really important factor we have to consider, because it's that or we just don't have access to the stock. I mean, we heard about all you can source, used vehicles from the UK, you can source used vehicles from, I don't know about South Africa, but how many right-hand drive jurisdictions there were around the world. They just don't work. And so we go back time and time again to the one market that actually fulfills New Zealand's needs across a variety of different standards. And yet we seem to keep chopping it off without any, I suppose, feedback to what that market actually supplies. So yeah, sure, step change. No one's going to argue with that. It's just, is the timing going to be right? And that's where things come unstuck. Now, It's a good point to this. I've got to just keep carrying this point. One of the reasons why the ESC rule, and to an extent the exhaust emission rules, ultimately worked, was because industry lobbied successfully with the officials of the day to bring in a time frame step change that it could work with. It wasn't ideal, but it gave everyone the breathing space they needed. And so anyone that ever says to me, oh, you guys all complained about ESC and look where you are now, it's working okay, it's because we actually sat down like grown-ups at the table and said, okay, this doesn't work. You want to be here, we're here. Let's try and find some sort of common ground in the middle. And we had things like step changes, and that's how it should be done. So you end up with the common goal that everybody wants.
And arguably we'll get there. I think you'll get there on this too. But let's not forget the fact that the industry was shouting and crying very, 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 very loudly right up until the last minute on both of those changes, to the point of, in some cases, legal funds and all this kind of stuff being talked about and thrown around. Let's not suggest there was some kind of happy compromise and everyone went into the final decision happy and ready to go.
No, I mean, I was at the coalface of that, and if you recall, the price of light commercials there for a while was insane. There were former importers of light commercials who turned their business model around, and they're buying, I can't say the word, but beaten up end-of-life commercial vehicles, and they were repowering them back in their workshops with used import engines brought in from Japan in containers to get the things from rust repairs and then back out on the road again because there wasn't the supply of those vehicles in from Japan. So again, like I know what you're trying to say, Richard, but this we don't do it very well.
Yeah, and on the ESC rule, they went ahead of Australia for ESC on light commercials, which actually meant that there were some new light commercial models that were unavailable for one of them for 18 months.
Mm.
So, it just disappeared out of our market until they were able to do it for that model, and then it was reintroduced.
Can you recall
Um,
what vehicle that was?
it was one of the Toyota, it was the Land Cruiser, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and they prioritised the utes and the vans. So I think in this case, for the vehicle exhaust emission standards, because it requires a factory re-engineering, that's where the constraint for the new vehicle market lies. And we don't import enough utes for them to do that. So it's got to be in conjunction with the Australian market as well as the Asian market, because the utes are supplied to Asia quite a lot from the Thai factories, much more for Asia than it is for Australia and New Zealand. So that's where our constraint comes. That's a production planning cycle through the manufacturing process.
How much extra time do you want?
Well, we've always said that we can do it.
How much extra time does the new vehicle industry that you are in no way professionally connected with anymore want?
Well, the new vehicle sector has consistently said getting ahead of Australia for vehicle exhaust emission standards that require platform changes is incredibly problematic.
Right, let's move on to a few other things that no doubt will be problematic. The CCS credits can be traded from June 1. Wakatahi confirms clean car standard CO2 credit trading can apply from June 1 this year. VS says both sellers and buyers of credits must be anti-money laundering verified. If you want to trade credits, contact the CCS team at NZTA by... Yeah. Anyway, is the system ready, Graham? Are you ready to trade some credits?
I'm not going to trade any credits, Richard, but hold them in my hot little hands. But yeah,
this system does seem awfully manual for something of this kind.
And awfully complicated, and without giving my brethren in the used car industry a bum rap, I imagine this is challenging for a number of traders out there in the sector, that it's just all in the too hard basket. AML requirements? Boy, I can't wait to see that pop out in a few bank accounts going forward. A lot of them struggle to do that at the bank when they bank $10,000 cash and the teller asks them for a form. God only knows how it's going to work out with their CCS credits and the GST as well, might I add as well.
Wonder why that is.
Yeah. And for a couple of brands in the new vehicle sector that are on pay-as-you-go, their main concern, as I understand it, will be the ability to get their AML components done in time. It's been a consistent message through the working group meetings is give us time, and I'm not sure if there's going to be sufficient time, but AML is very problematic for the market. And it's not just those that have a problem with English not being their first language. It is even a problem for savvy new vehicle distributors.
Yeah, it's put me in a funny one. This one that I've had approaches now from 2 distributors to introduce them to management at Tesla because they want to buy some credits.
But I was going to say, so what's the price going to do? What's the price going to do? Right? We all know what's the price going to do come June the 1st.
Well, the price is capped. I mean, there's a very strong cap to the price. That's the good thing about it.
It's capped that way. It ain't capped that way.
No, you're right, and I think it will depend on what people feel, whether they're going to be an oversupply of credits, and therefore how much the price is driven down. Goodness knows. The only thing I know is that before I resigned as the CEO of the Motor Industry Association, I was very clear that the Motor Industry Association office did not want to get involved in the trading of credits. What a nightmare.
Yeah, smart decision, actually, I think. I've lost you, Richard.
Yeah, he's gone very still.
He must be having a sneezing fit. Oh, he's gone altogether. It's just you and I, David. We can carry the show together ourselves.
Well, I mean, what mayhem can we get up to?
Shh, don't tell the boss. And I was going to say, in between Richard popping back or not, I mean, for companies like Tesla, for example, here's the issue: is all Tesla actually have to offer are credits. And I imagine some ruthless negotiators in the back room somewhere are well aware of Tesla's position as to whether they hold or they sell. It's like having a stock that I guess people want, but everyone knows you can't do anything else with it either. It's like a worthless stock to hold unless you sell it. Are you going to chase the market down, or do you hold your line? There he's coming back now. There we are.
Yeah.
It's
Well done carrying on there, lads.
It's a very good question, Brian. It's a very good question, and I think that will become clearer in the January to March period next year when the fleet average buyers start to think very seriously about it. If I was in a Tesla shoes, this is money for jam. This is additional revenue. The government's been kind to them. They've got credits that they can sell.
We can't. We're not allowed to say that. We spent all the show last week debating about how it was a CCD was basically a tax rebate for the rich buying the Teslas, and then we're talking about them also Tesla cashing in on the scheme too. We just can't win, can we?
But it's not just Tesla. There are other makes that will probably have an excess, and so this is interesting. It's going to be a whole new ballgame.
I know, but the media, all they know is Tesla.
Most of the ones that are going to have an excess are tied to an existing ICE vehicle distributor. I mean, if you take Opel, I believe they're expecting to have a big credit. Well, they're tied to a whole pile of other brands that are potentially not going to be.
I think you might find though that those brands could very well say, but where's the biggest net gain going to be made from? So there's an opportunity in here, but we'll see how the market plays out.
Yeah, BYD is going to have a massive number of credits, probably second only to Tesla. But of course, they're tied to Jeep and Ram, who desperately need credits, like nothing else on earth. They're going to need a lot of credits.
We'll see how that one goes.
Yeah.
It's fighting words, David.
This would have been
fighting words.
This would have been a whole lot more interesting if they'd found a way to trade credits between the used and the new markets. That would have just added a whole pile to the circus, I think.
I know, right? Pity we didn't do it.
Was that ever discussed out there, David?
Not that I'm aware of. The officials, if I recall correctly, were very clear from day one that there would be no trading between new and used. That was their starting position,
right?
And everybody just said, "Oh, okay." We didn't. We had so many other things that we were concerned with. We didn't even debate that one.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on to the next thing that I'm having to redo because I booted it out. When I booted myself out, it did that. Right. Next story.
We didn't miss it.
I've got like a bird's nest of cables in front of me because I ran in and jumped on the desk and I knocked something clearly. Advocating for more women to join automotive, a new collective called Women in Automotive New Zealand has been formed to advocate for more females to join the automotive industry workforce. The collective says that women are currently underrepresented in the industry and that 17% of the total automotive workforce is female and that 6% of current apprentices are female. Founding committee member Natasha Callister says she was inspired to launch Women in Automotive based on her own career experience in male-dominated industries. I know firsthand the challenges women can face, but also the tools, support framework, and strategies that can help progress careers into senior levels. Our purpose is to bring together organisations of influence behind a coordinated and aligned effort. That's some big words there. She's clearly smarter than I am. The collective partners, Collision Repair Association, MITO, Motor Industry Association, Motor Trade Association, NZME Driven, and Otago Polytechnic. I think that's an interesting project and a great one to see. We see a lot of talk about a bit of a lack of talent, a little bit lack of workforce, and we've got to bring it in from overseas. Well, I guess the whole argument goes that there is 50% of the population just waiting there to train up and use as industry talent, I guess, and particularly when, as is so often repeated, women make up such a massive chunk of the buying decision process and vehicle servicing process and all these kind of things. it's always good to take them on board. I'm guessing you were involved in the rubber stamping of involvement in that, David?
It was an idea promoted to the Motor Industry Association at about the time that Natasha organised the 1 hour video session with the minister and myself and others on the Clean Car Standard. I think it's a good initiative. A lot of the new vehicle distributors already have programs in place, but they're run individually through each of the distributors. Having an umbrella organisation that tries to look at it from an industry-wide sector, I think, is a good move. And I've always been of the personal view that gender ought to be completely irrelevant, but we seem to miss inviting women into the sector, and I think a lot of that goes back to the high school programs and career advisors and the old stereotyping. So there's a bit of work to be done, and I think women will be will do very well in the sector. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't.
Graham, have you got a woman working at Croydon's?
Yeah, we do. And I'm going to say the 2 points to this. One is that I think the used import industry, or used in general actually, is actually probably more on top of this than you might think when it comes to hiring. I mean, to an extent, I sniffed this a bit and I say, well, we're already hiring the best people we want anyway, to an extent. And I think there's been no barriers for quite some time within a lot of the industry. It doesn't matter your gender, are you the right person for the job? And that's far more important. I mean, I don't think most dealerships give a rat's about gender. It's just getting the right person to fit. And from a dealership perspective, I think it's been a little secret for quite some time now that it is advantageous to have a balance of people across your frontline staff and your service staff, because as you've just pointed out, 50% of our population don't have a dangly thing between their legs. And so we need to cater for that part of the marketplace. But another point to that, now my son is currently enrolled in a low-level automotive course at school as a sort of extension to his NCEA. And it was an open induction process. Any student could apply within his particular year. There was encouragement given across the entire school. I was sort of privy to the process. And have a guess how many girls have applied and been accepted into the program? None applied, which I thought was interesting. So his bus that trundles off, in fact, as we speak right now, is across at the Carrington Polytech today, is entirely a bunch of big burly blokes with lunchboxes in their space-time overalls, neatly pressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important question. How do we get them into the trade? I mean, because the trade, there's lots of different parts of the trade. It's not just the front desk. It's what happened behind, the mechanics, panel beaters, the spray painters. All of those areas. It's trying to break down the barriers and open up opportunities and tap into what is clearly quite a big employment sector if we can get the messaging right. But, that's an interesting exercise, Graham, about looking what's happening at schools and how many people do and don't apply. I think the challenge is how do you get them in the front end? Because where we do see women in the automotive sector tends to be in sales, admin, and support. But of course, we know there's a lot more to that. There's all of the mechanical issues as well. So I think this is a good initiative, and I think it will help to coordinate messaging, and over time, I think it will be quite successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being look, I know there's a lot of jobs in the industry that women can take on, but if we talk specifically about the mechanical side of it, it's not the same job that it used to be, and there's no need when you're a mechanic now to be able to hold an HQ, hold an automatic transmission above your head for half an hour while someone does up some bolts by hand. That's not the kind of job it is these days. It's far more technical. It's far more. It's almost a computer programming job at times, I think, it's certainly something that anyone can do, I think, with the right training.
So with electrified vehicles, it's quite different going looking forward.
Yes, exactly. Right now, Brendan Foote crowned 2022 Hyundai Dealer of the Year. Lower Hutt dealership Brendan Foote Hyundai has been named as the recipient of the 2022 Hyundai Dealer of the Year. award as it marks 50 years of operations. The award from Hyundai New Zealand is determined through quarterly evaluations measuring various key performance indicators across all dealerships in its national network. Brentford Metro received the accolade of Parts and Service Agent of the Year, as well as Finance and Insurance Dealer of the Year. The company also won the Best Customer Experience Dealer Award. Founded in 1973, the Brentford dealership acquired the Hyundai franchise in 2008. It's a very good dealership, that one. If anyone wants to read more about them, I think last year, if you go back into our back catalogue on the AutoTalk website, we did a big profile with them. I think there's a photo of a Brennan Foot dealership on the cover of that magazine. So, feel free to go and have a look at that.
Nice.
I guess that's your local Hyundai dealer there, David.
Yeah. Well, they used to also be the Holden dealer, so they still do the parts and servicing for the Holden vehicles. And of course, they've got a number of other. It's a super site, so they've got it's a multi-brand site. But when and then they have had Hyundai there, as you say, since 2008. And when Holden vacated the market, they moved across the road and took the spot that Holden had previously been occupied. So it's given Hyundai a really visible presence from that site.
I think both the Korean brands did very well out of the departure of Holden. They between them and MG, they tended to suck up a lot of the showroom space and market share as well. I think is I guess the point.
Well, I think Mitsubishi probably also benefited from Holden experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interestingly, around here, all the police drive utes, and so in the last month, they've all sent back their Colorados and come out with shiny new Tritons, which has been an interesting change to see. So, yeah. Now, we're getting on to the budget. EV charging network expanded in budget 2023. Major expansion of the nationwide EV charging network to deliver 23 charging hubs, with the private sector is planned in budget 2023. Budget 2023 also funds between 600 and 1,000 EV chargers in smaller rural communities, with $30 million approved for this purpose out of the total $120 million for a broader electric vehicle charging initiative. We're making sure there are more locations for people to tank up their EVs with a nationwide network of public electric vehicle charging hubs with multiple fast electric vehicle chargers, says Energy Minister Megan Woods. Will also ensure rural and regional communities have more options to charge up EVs, so a lack of chargers is no longer seen as a barrier to electric vehicle adoption as we decarbonise our energy system. Transport Minister Michael Wood says switching to EVs would allow us. We can cut it off there. Good to see. I find this interesting because, and this is a little bit of, I guess, beltway stuff, the charging hub system was still on trial. They were still, I think, locating their first one. I think it was going to be north of Wellington. They haven't built it yet, but they've already gone and decided they're going to build another 22. But good to see that come about, and also good to see that investment in those rural areas, because quite often those smaller chargers, and they're generally needed for things like Nissan Leafs and that kind of stuff, they tend to be less commercially viable from what I've seen. Certainly we've got a little one down the corner here in Mangawhai that's slightly squeezed because we've got a lot of very fast charging not far away. But I know it's quite a bit of investment for not a lot of income. So, good to see them doing it, and good to see them partnering with the private sector on this. The last thing we'd ever want would be the government to step in and take over these jobs, making it some kind of biddable system to subsidise commercial installations, I think is the way to go.
Yeah, look, this is for EV uptake to be successful, we need a trifecta. We need the vehicles to start off with, which we're getting, and we need the charging locations. So this is a real boost for that. And then the only thing that we'll need over time is to ensure that electrical grid is robust enough to be able to support all of those charging stations as well as home charging. So that's the trifecta: the generation and distribution, the charging points, and then the vehicles. And what the issue with charging stations is the old classic chicken and egg. What do you do first? But we've got such good penetration of EVs into our market between new and used that this just has to happen. And I'm, for one, very excited to see that in the budget, and I think that was a really good move.
Mm-hmm. What we need to see now is Vector to get the heck out of the Auckland charging market, because Auckland, as people know, is very undeveloped when it comes to charging, and that is because you've got a large incumbent player there who's giving it away for free. So why would anyone go and build new chargers when they are competing with free? Because it's really hard to compete with free.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think there was a time for that, and I think they need to start phasing that out. I agree.
Well, supposedly they were up for tender for sale, but that was quite some time ago, and I'm not sure they had a huge amount of call for them. I guess it's a very complicated situation. The good thing we're seeing now is that, again, as I mentioned this before, the fuel industry is getting into it. BP and Z Energy are both rolling out charges around, even in Auckland, at a reasonably rapid rate. So that is a really good thing. In fact, I was literally charging about an hour ago on the dairy flat BP. So that's a great step, and I think that one there and a few others that BP have put in is very similar to what we're going to see with these charging hubs. They've got multiple chargers, tow through stalls for people who are towing trailers, right next door to somewhere with toilets, coffee, food, so on and so forth. Really, really handy. I was charging, Graham, the Mustang Marquee.
No, you weren't. You were charging a Marquee. I don't know where you got the word Mustang from, Richard.
It's got a Mustang on it. It literally every time you turn it on, it traces through the Mustang horse and all that kind of stuff.
It's a Mustang Mackie. It's the full name. It's not a Mustang or a Mackie.
Oh,
it's a Mustang Mackie.
If I owned a sticker company, I could print some stickers up and put them on the side that said whatever I wanted it to. Doesn't make it a Mustang.
You could have a Mustang Aqua. It's got a really nice V8 burble, Graham.
If it's recorded, Richard, then shame on you. Shame for even playing the track. It's like being a 4-year-old all over again. You push your little car in the car and go around the carpet. You can do that with your Marquee as well if you want to. I won't hold it against you.
If we stick to the automotive side of the budget, the MTA is pleased with the Apprenticeship Boost extension. A $77 million extension to the Apprenticeship Boost scheme is welcome news for the automotive industry, says the Motor Trade Association. The scheme was scheduled to end this year, but an extension to the end of 2024 was part of Budget 2023. Apprenticeship Boost supports employers taking on apprentices by paying $500 a month for the first 2 years. Young people are the future of our industry, says MTA Advocacy and Stakeholder Manager Brian Anderton. Apprenticeship Boost make it easier for a business to take on an apprentice by shouldering some of the expense until that apprentice is up to speed. And members tell us that especially in a tough year like this one, an Apprenticeship Boost can be the difference between taking an apprentice on or not. So that is good to see. They really should have, in the context of what we're talking about today, they should have that photo the other way around. It should be a woman holding the pen and the pad, handing the vehicle over to a male customer. Now on to the company that keeps on giving us stories. Two Cheap Cars Boost Management. Joel Javantanum, my apologies if I got that wrong, has been appointed Retail General Manager at Two Cheap Cars, a newly created role leading the vehicle and finance insurance sales teams. He's a skilled commercial leader with broad experience in digital finance and insurance and successfully leading large sales teams. Most recently, he had risen through the ranks at GE Capital from account manager to general manager cards. His appointment significantly strengthens the Two Cheap Cars management team as the business renews its focus on retail excellence and profitable growth. That sounds a little bit optimistic. Yeah.
Well, my personal view here is that they have a problem with their title, Two Cheap Cars. Cheap cars doesn't sound like you're buying something that's going to go for very long, does it? I've never really understood the name and wonder how much the name holds them back.
It hasn't hurt them in the past, to be honest, David. I don't think it's hurt. It's actually, I think they've played it really well. And particularly to a demographic of New Zealand's car buying market that actually is budget conscious, like really cash strapped, and it appeals to that particular sector. As I say, for all we wouldn't say deride in that move, I think on face value, without knowing anything further, it's a really smart move. One aspect of Too Cheap that I think has been missing has been exactly that, a retail commercially savvy manager. It's lots of really clever people in the background when it comes to stock and the systems and the company and structure. But I always think there's been a bit of a disconnect between that and the actual retail experience. And if that's what the new appointment, if that's his mandate, then good on them.
And if I can say something slightly controversial, someone from a corporate background that knows not to yell and appropriate at staff. Those are the industry will know what I'm talking about there. You can go back through the stories, but a little bit of corporate experience and corporate carry on would be appropriate. Would be very appropriate. Electric Pony, first driver Ford's Mustang Mach-E. So if you want to read about the Mustang Mach-E, we have a great first drive there from the launch this week from Dave McLeod. That's on AutoTalk, but also over on EVs and Beyond. I think we've got an extended version on EVs and Beyond. Great looking, fun car there. I might hit the road in it and have a bit of a play this weekend, I think. It's pretty cool. Also this week, the Ioniq 6 launched. That really interesting looking, crazy EV streamliner that gets great range and all sorts of other stuff. Really annoying. I haven't done that many car launches lately, and then I got sick this week and missed two electric vehicle launches. So that was a bit annoying. And last story for today, what I'm sure you guys might have a little bit interesting take on. China overtakes Japan in Q1 vehicle exports. For the first time in the first quarter of 2023, China overtook Japan to become the biggest global exporter of new vehicles, shipping just over 1 million units from its home ports. Car News China says it's collated the automotive production data from local websites. Reports that Japan's export in the first quarter were 1.047 million vehicles. I'm assuming this is new vehicles because I can't imagine if you had used vehicles, and I'm sure that number would be higher. SAIC, Chery, Tesla China, Chang'an, Geely, Great Wall Motors, Dongfeng, JAC, BYD, and BAIC are the top 10 export brands. The biggest markets are Russia, the United States, Mexico, the United Kingdom, Belgium, Japan, Australia, Germany, United Arab Emirates, and South Korea. The vehicles from China are mostly exported to Egypt, South Africa and Africa, Saudi Arabia, India, Thailand, and Vietnam in Asia. That's the kind of same information again. Anyway, interesting that really, isn't it? It's kind of snuck up. No one really ever thought too much about China's kind of international aspect. You see a little bit here and there, but they're definitely growing and building arguably world class cars now.
And
serious.
No, I knew this was coming because I've seen the production figures over the last few years. I think the other market to watch is India. India is now the largest populous country in the world, and the interesting thing about India too is it's right-hand drive. There are quite a lot of manufacturers have factories in India, and I think India will start to pick up its game as well. So we're going to see a broadening and a shifting of the areas from where vehicles come from. And of course, what's happening is no secret here is that the manufacturing process looks for ways to keep costs down. And if labour is a cheap component, you go to those countries and partner with those countries for production.
Yeah, I wouldn't think we're drastically far away from seeing cars out of Africa as well, because China obviously labour rates are rising there, and they've started moving a lot of production to Africa. So that's another potential we could see in the near future as well. I just think it's interesting looking at some of these vehicles and some of these places that are being exported to. I mean, if you take, for example, India. Chinese cars have been going very strongly in India, and under interesting names. You get Chevrolets and Chinese-built Chevrolets in India. If you go to America and you buy a small Buick, it's Chinese-built, and a lot of General Motors' new electric product that's about to launch there is either based on a Chinese platform or built in China and exported to the US.
I bet there's a lot of people in the Midwest and flyover states that would spit their barbecue all over their napkins if they knew that when they went to buy the new Buick.
Most of them just wouldn't know.
Oh, that's what I mean. They just wouldn't know.
Some of them do, and yes, there's quite a lot of xenophobic behaviour out of the belts. But I think the issue that China has done is that they've improved their quality of production and the quality of materials. Early on, the steel production was very variable. That's improved out of sight. And it's the same trajectory we saw from Japan post World War II. then later on from Korea, then we've seen China. I think India will be next. And as you say, Richard, ultimately Africa.
I think the pace of change we're seeing out of China at the moment is well beyond what we saw. You know, people liken it to the Koreans. Yeah. I think the pace of change is beyond what we saw with the Koreans. I mean, I was around probably late in the terrible stages of what was coming out of Korea when it started to get good. But even then, it still took, another decade, another 15 years between it being acceptable to it being market leading. We're seeing stuff coming out of China now that 3-4 years ago was terrible, and some of these cars coming through now are, I think, in build quality and in technology, the equal of, or if not surpassing, some of the European stuff. Not necessarily saying anything we've got necessarily on the ground right now, but some of the stuff I've seen that's nearing release, it's crazy the speed at which China is accelerating what they build. And there's plenty of people driving around, and again, in New Zealand and stuff that they just don't know as Chinese. If you buy a late model Volvo, if you buy certain late model BMWs, you are buying a Chinese car, and you would have no idea, and you wouldn't care. And I believe and I won't name which one, but one of those brands, JD Power, they surveyed those vehicles, and they found the quality on the Chinese stuff versus the original home market stuff was drastically superior. So it's interesting. I'd suggest I'd ask, when are we going to start seeing these Ford Rangers coming out of China or that kind of thing. But again, we go back to the cost of labor in China going up. Is that some of these Chinese companies are now getting so big and so good at exporting, or big at exporting, that they're buying factories in Thailand in order to export. We'll probably see Great Wall utes coming out of Thailand to New Zealand soon, as opposed to China, just because they're becoming more of this engineering and development workforce necessarily than cheap manufacturing.
It's been a Chinese aspiration for some time to be a big exporter of automotive vehicles, and they've worked hard at doing it. So good on them. Yeah.
Look, thank you very much, guys. That's an hour, or nearly an hour. So another long one. Thanks again for joining us, Graham and David. I hope you guys have great weekends ahead. I'm going to go out there and drive around in my Mustang.
Have fun, Richard.
Cheers.
Poking the bear.
I've got a Mustang. You can come and visit me if you like, and I'll make the real noise, and you can go vroom, vroom as you drive.
I'll make it to the other end of Auckland without having to fill up the tank.
Can I make before we close down, everyone? I've got a small little shout out here to make, and this is a bit of a cheeky ask. Somebody I know very well, actually, may or may not be going to the hallowed home of the Mustang later on this year. For a month, as it turns out. We'd like to broadcast our show from the road in Colorado or something like that, Richard. If you are,
look, let's just cut this short, Graham. Ford New Zealand or whoever else is out there, we know you're listening. Simon Rutherford in particular, we know you listen to Graham's Mustang saga. Can someone lend him a car in America? We know you've got a press car sitting somewhere in LA. He's not picky. He'll take a Mustang. He'll take an F-150. He'll take a Ford Focus. He might even take an electric car. But just someone throw him a car for his trip to America. Inquiries to richard@automediagroup.co.nz.
You know where to find me.
I'll let him run something in a magazine somewhere. I promise. Anyway, thank you so much. We'll catch everyone next week.